Well, guys, today we are diving into military programs, so please expect a tremendous amount of acronyms. I will try to relist all acronyms used in the video description, so please reference there if you get tripped up. But with that out of the way, let's begin. Roderick John Castle III entered into service into the United States Marine Corps in 1994, and by his retirement, Castle earned the rank of sergeant, or an E5. Castle's primary MOS, or military occupational specialty, was a 6531. Or aircraft ordnance technician, Castle served at the MAG-13, or Marine Aircraft Control Group 13, of the 3D MAW, or 3rd Marine Aircraft Wing, stationed at MCAS Marine Corps Air Station Yuma. And yes, I know, we're already getting into the acronyms. Now, real fast, I previously discussed Yuma Proving Ground, a U.S. Army MRTFB, or Major Range and Test Facility base in regards to UFO legacy program operations. 23 U.S. MRTFBs exist, 8 Army, 6 Navy, 7 Air Force, and 2 Defense Agency. These include Edwards 412th Test Wing, NAWC Patuxent River, and the Atlantic Undersea Test and Evaluation Command, Fort Huachuca, and the West Desert Test Center, and more. One of my prevailing and prominent theories regarding UFO legacy programs is the usage of these critical core MRTFBs for UFO research, development, test, and evaluation. This includes everything from craft storage, accompanying deep underground military bases beneath MRTFBs, and utilization of restricted airspace for test flight of recovered or reverse-engineered craft. MCAS, out of which Castle operated, is not part of Yuma Proving Ground, therefore it is not part of the MRTFB. In fact, while Castle's experience involved a coordinated U.S. Marine Corps experiment, I wager the USMC is quite unlikely to run and operate UFO legacy program operations, and keep this in mind as we progress in our investigation. While I can present ample testimony, evidence, files, and research that the U.S. Army, Air Force, and Navy operate siloed UFO legacy programs in conjunction with the U.S. Big Six intelligence agencies, I can find no such evidence even suggesting USMC engages with the UFO portfolio. Castle served with the VMA 513, nicknamed the Flying Nightmares, a USMC attack squadron known for use of its AV-8B Harrier jets, and towards the tail end of his service trained as a helicopter flight medic. Now, if you recall in 2023, Jeremy Corbell released a video of a supposed triangle UFO over 29 Palms. Arguments persist to this day if the video depicts a craft or a group of flares, but that and 29 Palms are not relevant to our investigation today. Indeed, I believe many studying Castle's testimony would look for evidence of UFO legacy program operations out of 29 Palms Marine Station, but I vehemently disagree. I believe that by studying the Hunter-Warrior Advanced Warfighting Experiment, we can truly gain unparalleled insights into UFO legacy programs' conduct, testing, and training missions on U.S. soil. Hang tight, because after we detail Castle's encounter, we will spend a significant amount of time exploring the 1997 Hunter-Warrior Experiment.
We maintained our jets, and we did emergency duty, on 12-hour shifts. Me and my guys, we were overnight, so we were 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. And a routine night, it's hot out there. We're just hanging out near the Humvee, probably in chairs or hanging out in the back. We get a call on the radio that there's, either unexplained or unauthorized something about flare activity in the desert. Maybe 3 to 4 miles out, maybe 5. This is the part that gets a little sketchy, but I've tried to find it on maps. We come over a hill. We're yanking the trailer behind us. Maybe driving 30, 35 miles an hour. We come over a hill, and all 5 of us see it. It is a black. From that angle, equilateral triangle, meaning all sides the same, with 3 white, yellowish orbs in each corner. And possibly some kind of benting on the sides, but definitely rounded on the edges, not pointy. That was there hanging in the sky. So accompanying it were about 30 military type dudes with black uniforms and 5 to 6, can't remember exactly, vehicles. Look like F-150s, F-350s, the big trucks, jacked up, all black, all matte, some with canopies, some with antennas. This is all coming in a flash, right?
Mm-hmm.
Within 30 seconds of coming down this hill. Enough to notice that the thing was hanging there, enough to notice it was slightly turning counterclockwise.
Mm-hmm.
That perhaps there was some indentation in the center, maybe some type of striation or venting on the side, but these are impressions that I've had to find and integrate with that initial shock and awe of seeing something like this.
During the 2nd of March 1997 to the 14th of March 1997, Roderick Castle with his team of 5 to 6 other Marines and the VMA 513 Flying Nightmares engaged in the Hunter Warrior Advanced Warfighting Experiment out of the Marine Corps Air Ground Combat Center in 29 Palms, located in the Southern California desert. Castle and his fellow team operated attached to an experimental Special Purpose Marine Air Ground Task Force. Ironically to this channel, Castle and his fellow Marines participated in the experiment as a Harrier jet crash retrieval team. One night during the 12-day operation, Castle and his team were engaged in overnight crash retrieval duties for Harriers. The Marines were sent in to investigate unidentified flare activity. As you will see in our interview, Castle and I have worked hard to trace almost exactly where this incident took place to reduce as much ambiguity and questions as possible. Our incident occurred within a 7.5-mile radius of Emerson Dry Lakebed, northwest of 29 Palms and about 90 miles southeast of Edwards Air Force Base in the Antelope Valley. If you know my work, I bet you can already guess where we will be going in our investigation. Castle and his Marines came over a hill heading northwest in this area, and we can find multiple dirt roads with varying terrain near the Emerson Dry Lakebed. According to the Federal Aviation Administration's special use of airspace, this event occurred within R2501C. I strongly recommend committing this piece of airspace to memory, as regular old boring discussion of air traffic organizational policy and restricted pieces of airspace will become paramount to our investigation.
So this is what it would look like if you were looking straight up at it. Of course, that's not the angle. It was more, if I want to use that.
So you only saw the underside of this, right? You cannot speak to what the top looked like.
I'm going to do this faintly because there was perhaps convex, right, going inward.
Mm-hmm.
Is that what I said before? All this aspect, very black, blocking out the sky and the stars. You get that deep dark blue in the desert sometimes. The moon was not, I don't know where the moon was that night. It must have been over one of the hills.
Coming over the hill in a Humvee carrying fire suppression equipment, the Marines encountered an enormous equilateral triangular craft that measured approximately 300 feet in length, hovering silently 150 to 200 feet in the air. The craft emitted no detectable sound, featured no exhaust ports, bolts, seams, or rivets, and unlike a Harrier or helicopter, sat stationless in the air, no wobbling, bobbling, or weaving, and featured no exhaust signs like one would see from a Harrier's VTOL thrust engines. The ominous vehicle was matte black or darker, with no observable reflectivity, and featured 3 lights at each corner, bright lights but not blinding. The lights were a combination of yellow, white, and gold, but oddly cast no shadow onto the ground. Below the craft, an estimated 150 to 200 feet away from Castle, were unmarked black tactical vehicles, and an accompanying unit of approximately 30 armed men in unmarked black uniforms. Like the stories of Weygand and Herrera, these men bore no insignia, identifiable markings, flags, or name tags, and the operators all spoke with American dialects. The vehicles seemed to be all Ford F-150 to F-350 types with all black canopies. Some featured antennae on top of the canopy, but all vehicles were all black. No logos, symbols, chrome, or metallic reflections were visible off of any of the automobiles. Despite Castle and his fellow VMA 513 Marines operating in uniform with authority on U.S. soil, half of the unmarked operators intercepted the Marines at gunpoint. The Marines were disarmed, held at gunpoint, and threatened and ordered to stay silent.
So we're alert, but we're of course tired, but we don't have night vision stuff. This is low tech.
Mm-hmm.
We're Marines, and we've been through combat training, but we're glorified mechanics. So we know we're technicians.
So there's a handful of tactical vehicles, all black, and a team of about 30. What was the team doing?
Not enough time to even evaluate that, because the minute we came up over, about half of them, maybe 15, came running up the hill towards us in V formations, with guns.
What were they armed with?
Some type of sub-type machine gun. I'm not a guy who knows all the guns, but I am an artist, and I have found a way to use AI to help me with this process. I did send you a picture at one point, and maybe that could be shown.
Yeah,
that's exactly what they look like.
Okay, and
other than maybe my picture ends up with a Caucasian skin tone at the top, but that not necessarily the case. But that's the only place any type of skin for any of these men might have been shown.
So, and we'll show it on screen because, of course, we're working with that 3D artist to recreate the scene.
Yeah.
And to your specific specifications. But so you're saying all black Army helmets, sometimes goggles, black, what looks almost like a ski mask, black fatigues, black tactical gear, submachine gun.
Classic black clad mercenary type. I'm an artist, so I'm going to see things through a lens. Sometimes through art and movies and comics, and these were, if you want to drop some evil villains and black clad mercenaries, this is what these guys look like. Yeah, right up, harsh language.
Yeah.
Put it, get your ass down, get your fucking ass down, nah, get your ass down. Not shooting,
but looking like they're ready to.
Very close to our heads. As if they didn't want us to look at anything. We felt, my initial reaction was we f***ed up. We came upon something that we shouldn't be involved in, and I'm just going to comply because I'm scared. Again, we're Marines, but we're technicians, and our M16s are in the back of the truck, in a rack.
Right. You guys are there for fire suppression.
Not even loaded. We don't have magazines on it. We're carrying tool belts.
Because you were, for the exercise, Harrier crash retrieval duty if needed. You're not there to be armed or stationed.
No. We fight if we need to fight, but that's not our primary job.
So these guys are harsh language, head down. They don't want you to see anything.
Yeah. So, and keep in mind, this whole thing, max 4 minutes, maybe 3. That's what I want people to know too. This is a flash, adrenaline filled witness event.
Yeah.
This is something I came across accidentally, and I see it now as some very positive, mostly positive thing that it opened up some avenues for me, but as far as thinking, but something I probably would have if things hadn't changed, maybe, in the last 2-3 years with the energy about this subject, the stigma, I probably would have just taken to my grave. Maybe told stories to excite, my grandkids or something. Oh, Grandpa Roderick's talking about that black triangle again. That was the first demands, out of the vehicle, out. Minimum language, which tells you they mean business. And I don't know how else to say it, but anybody that's been there knows what it feels like when you know for certainty this guy's probably this close from shooting you in the head. It's a feeling. It's a real thing that all the acid in your stomach just floods you. You're ready to die.
Yeah.
So this was all happening at the same time in multiple ways because we all are affected by that trauma differently. So I might freeze because I'm trying to conceptualize the whole situation. My other guy might get aggressive. Another guy might run.
Did these guys, did they have any insignia, any name tags, any plates?
No. It's like completely black on purpose, obvious. Every truck was painted matte black.
But they spoke with American dialect, right?
The few that I heard.
The cuss words.
And they knew what they were doing because certain guys talk, certain guys don't. The rest keep their mouth shut.
So I know that your number one concern was for your life and the life of your fellow Marines. Could you tell what the rest of the convoy was doing, what the trucks were doing, what the triangle was doing during this time?
Of course, I've gone over this in my head a billion times. And I got my kind of theories, but I'm not stuck on anything. It felt more like they were there with it. It's some kind of overwatch. Maybe it was why it was hovering right there. I don't know.
After approximately 2 minutes since first observing the craft, and whilst being detained by the operators, the triangle ceased its slow rotation counterclockwise, climbed at an angle, and darted to the northwest at an extremely high rate of speed. And remember that direction. But again, this craft took off with no visible auditory or optical signs of propulsion or thrust.
I did see it zoom to the northwest, which is the general direction of the road, at a very high rate of speed. Again, no noise, no exhaust, no nothing, just slow descent. And then
so it rose up a little bit and then just
at an angle.
Did it curve or did it seem like the craft remained parallel to the ground?
Yes, that's important. Staying like this.
So it didn't turn at an angle, just rose up.
Yeah, it's on some kind of, it needs to stay that direction.
Did it seem like there was visible acceleration or did this just...
At first it was like maybe a slow buildup, that angle, and then when it hit that to nothing.
Wow.
Like a very tiny light to nothing. And that's what resonates with other reports I've heard. It's just this rapid acceleration.
The craft disappeared almost instantaneously, and quickly, the black operators sprinted back down the hill, boarded their tactical vehicles, and drove off to the northwest at a high rate of speed. In a state of psychological shock, the men tried and failed to start their Humvees. The vehicles remained inoperable for several minutes.
They seemed surprised as we were, but they were ready. Because that's what they do.
Mm-hmm.
That was the sense. They're doing their job. The minute the thing was gone, they've run back down the hill, back to their vehicles. They take off down that road, same general direction as the craft. We pick ourselves up. We're the best way I can explain is a state of shock after a car accident or something. The one younger guy who was, always the one that talked the most, he said, what's I remember that distinctly. It's like those first few moments after a car crash that something gets embedded. Got back in the vehicle, attempted to turn the Humvee on. It would not start at first. Relatively rare. You got just a side switch. It's a diesel engine, pretty reliable. It took maybe 5 minutes to get it going. Trying every minute.
I am reminded here of Dr. Kevin Knuth at the 2023 Soul Foundation, where he discussed vehicle malfunctions in the presence of UFOs.
You might recall the scene from Close Encounters of the Third Kind where Richard Dreyfuss is in his truck investigating power outages, and the UFO flies over his truck and the truck stops running. McCampbell in 1983 had identified several automobile interference types. You get engine disruption and failure. The engines sometimes fail to restart in the vicinity of a UFO. And when the UFO leaves, sometimes the engine restarts. When I saw that in the movie, I was like, oh, this is just silly at this point. Engines don't just restart. You can't just, how is the UFO magically restarting the engine? Well, if you think about the physics, you can reason through this, and this is what McCampbell had done. If you have a strong enough electric field around this UFO, you could possibly be ionizing the air. How strong has this field got to be? It's got to be on the order of 3 times 10 to the 6 volts per meter. That'll short out the spark plugs in the car. It'll short out the distributor cam, so the car will stop running.
But this also brings up an interesting point. If the VMA 513 Marines experienced vehicle failure, this would imply the black operators and their ground tactical vehicles were equipped with countermeasures, maybe similar to something like a Faraday cage to deflect the electromagnetic interference produced by the triangle. Arriving back to their Quonset hut, the Marines were greeted by their gunnery sergeant and a warrant officer. The commanding officers checked on the Marines, asked them about their mission and what they saw, and reminded the men whatever they encountered was just simple flares and to not tell others.
We drive back to base. Our shift, this was like 2-3. We finished our shift just by standing by again. Not a lot of talking. Back to our Quonset huts. By 7 a.m., our gunnery sergeant and our chief warrant officer was hanging out in our Quonset hut, which is strange. Marines don't do things with a lot of words. They do things by presence and implying something. Seemed like they were checking in on us. We already knew what it was about, but it's just like some flare activity out there, guys. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. You know, it was implied. We knew what they were saying. This is flares. You guys stumbled across something you shouldn't have seen, but no big deal.
Now, it is my opinion the warrant officer and gunnery sergeant were not briefed on the incident, the triangle, or the black team. And this is because of the way USAP, or Unacknowledged Special Access Programs, are conducted, which I do believe in fact Castle encountered. Therefore, these commanding officers would not have a need to know about the triangle or the operation. Therefore, I think it is highly likely, bordering on absolute certainty, the commanding officers were informed Marines in their command had encountered USAP operations and sensitive materials and were to remind their Marines to retain absolute silence about their encounter. Now, one of the most intriguing pieces here is the day following the incident, Castle was subject to an anthrax booster. Castle had, shortly before Hunter Warrior, already received a booster for his already taken anthrax vaccine, so why another immediately after the counter? Indeed, DoD mandates for all U.S. military personnel to vaccinate against anthrax did not go effect until December 1997. And from the Gulf War in 1991 up to 1997, only some troops, if necessary, were given the anthrax vaccines and boosters.
The following day, we were called to medical and given a anthrax booster, they called it. Now, as far as we knew, we had already been given the anthrax vaccine, maybe a year prior.
Right.
It was always controversial. But we did it because we were told. And in those days, there was a lot of grumbling among the Marines, and there was usually a guy with a rifle, near the medical area where they're giving the anthrax. Sometimes people would talk.
So it doesn't feel like a suggestion you take.
Yeah, again, a Marine thing, a suggestion that we're all taking this and keep your mouth shut.
Had you already received like a booster? Because I know that Like you said, the anthrax vaccine was already controversial.
Yeah.
I know that for some servicemen it was forced if they were overseas in the Middle East, and later on.
That's my question. It wasn't like we were getting ready to go somewhere where there had been a scare or something. It was just me and those guys. So again, it's hard not to get, but it was us, and there was a guy with a rifle, and we signed something like we did before.
Mm-hmm.
First time we signed took the anthrax vaccine, all of us signed something from what I remember.
So after you take the booster, did anyone ever come up to you and tell you, do not talk about what you saw after the warrant officer as well speaking to you? Were you ever forced to sign anything regarding the incident, or just?
Not about that, nothing specific. Implied. It's a general feel that Marines will keep their mouth shut if told, which is generally true.
Now, of course, if it was just Castle here, I wouldn't be surprised. But knowing two other Marines with similar stories, of course I asked. And to my surprise, I learned that both Michael Herrera and Jonathan Weygant stated they were subject to anthrax boosters immediately after encountering, in Weygant's case, a team of black operators and a crashed non-human UFO. And in Michael's case, a team of black operators and an enormous 300-foot diameter 8-gun alien reproduction vehicle. Perhaps it really is too conspiratorial to think what could have possibly been the purpose of this anthrax booster, but it is a data point we simply cannot ignore. Following his exit from the Marine Corps, Castle attempted to push the encounter from his mind while also dealing with the psychological trauma of being detained at gunpoint by American operators on U.S. soil. By 2002, Castle had an additional bizarre experience that may possibly relate to UFO Legacy Program operations. Wackenhut, now called G4S Solutions, is a prominent private security firm founded in 1954 that is synonymous with UFO Legacy programs. I have spoken about Wackenhut previously as the trainers to Department of Energy Special Response Teams, or SRTs, which may have comprised the operators that detained and interrogated Jonathan Weygant in the jungles of northern Peru in late March, early April 1997. I have also discussed Wackenhut's infamous board member, CIA Deputy Director, NSA Director, Vice Director of the Defense Intelligence Agency, Director of National Intelligence, Director of the National Underwater Reconnaissance Office, Bobby Ray Inman. I have discussed Inman in numerous projects, so I recommend checking out any of these videos.
It's only become more significant now once I started doing some research and realizing possible sources of those type of mercenaries that do that work. And a combination of my Marine brothers, Herrera, Weygant, hearing their stories and being like, finally there was a triangle, enough information that I could start digging locations, contracts, government contracts back in the 90s. And the term, the company Wackenhut kept coming up. And then I remember I was recruited, not a recruit, I received a letter of an event, a recruiting event by them when I first got out of the reserves, the New York Army National Guard in 2002. And it was within 3 months of me getting out. At the time I figured I'm just on a list of veterans. However they got that, they were data mining and they got my email. But thinking back now, knowing what I know about Wackenhut, it may have been an attempt. If nothing else, it was an attempt to pull me in as an asset. Because I did work on, they were looking for people that worked on helicopters. They didn't specifically say ordnance. They did say experience with the UH-1 Huey and the AH-1 Cobras, Super Cobras, which I knew enough about that I could work on them.
But that's interesting because you were just training as a helicopter flight medic. That wasn't your MOS. Your MOS was...
No, I'd left the ordnance behind at the New York Air National Guard at Syracuse.
So they knew something about you if they knew that you were actively training as a helicopter flight medic. In 2002, 3 years after he left service, Castle was approached out of the blue by Wackenhut to join their helicopter teams. Wackenhut seemingly knew all about Castle's military service record and training as a helicopter flight medic. But why discuss this, and why is Wackenhut important to mention, and what significance can we find in Wackenhut attempting to contract a Marine Corps sergeant who seemed to observe clandestine UFO Legacy Program operations? Well, aside from the possible involvement with the DOE NEST, or Nuclear Emergency Response Teams, that brutalized Weygand and having Inman serve on their board of directors, Wackenhut is one of the most infamous and prolific private security agencies associated with UFO legacy program operations. Wackenhut has both been implicated with performing security for UFO legacy program sites, or in Weygand's case, possibly involved with clandestine UFO crash retrieval operations. We mention Wackenhut only ever so briefly now, but please keep them in your mind for later for much more investigation and the possibility that the team Castle observed was a Wackenhut trained and manned DOE SRT. Wackenhut historically provided professional security, especially perimeter security, for many US and DOE installations. And these include the Nevada test site and ever-elusive Groom Lake Area 51. Now, let's finally analyze Castle's testimony in its entirety to transform a first-hand UFO encounter into what I propose is a unique glimpse into UFO legacy program operations. Castle's sighting of the Triangle and its operational ground team occurred within the area of operations of Marine Corps Air-Ground Combat Center 29 Palms. During the 2nd to 14 March 1997 Hunter-Warrior Advanced Warfighting Experiment, while Castle was attached to a special-purpose Marine Air-Ground Task Force. Recall how Castle's experience occurred whilst performing overnight crash retrieval exercises for AV-8B Harrier jets. It is by considering this, I wager this incident occurred during the 3rd phase of Hunter-Warrior. And before we go any further, let's revisit a few details of Castle's encounter. Castle encountered a massive, exotic, human-made aerospace vehicle that I will make the case was reverse-engineered from non-human technology. Alongside a heavily armed ground team equipped with tactical vehicles resistant to the craft's electromagnetic effects. This clandestine team was operating in the area of operations of, at the time, the largest experiment to date by the newly renamed Marine Corps Warfighting Laboratory, involving several ground and air combat units. Clearly, the Triangle and its clandestine Special Mission Unit did not choose the remote, uninhabited area of Emerson Dry Lake Bed that was right smack in the middle of the Hunter-Warrior experiment to be seen by friendly American servicemen. The team chose an active warfighter experiment zone to operate in the shadows. Due to these factors, it is bordering on certainty the Triangle and the clandestine team wished to operate on range in the AO of the Hunter Warfighter experiment undetected. But what was their objective? I theorize this team and its craft, secret via USAP or Intelligence Community CAP Controlled Access Program, wished to attach themselves to Hunter-Warrior to train and run practice ops alongside Blue, aka friendly assets, while maintaining secrecy hidden out of sight from Blue soldiers, personnel, vehicles, comms, networks, etc. But let me explain. As I have already mentioned, Castle's experience strikes similar chords to that of Herrera and Weygand. In Weygand's case in 2009, the young Marines stumbled upon a clandestine team with tactical vehicles actively loading containers, possibly filled with humans, under an enormous octagonal alien reproduction vehicle in the jungles of Sumatra, Indonesia. In Weygand's case in 1997, just days or a few weeks after Castle's experience, the young Marine was detained and interrogated by a clandestine team in all black that seemingly sprung out of nowhere in the Peruvian jungle after Weygand and other Marines had arrived to the scene of a crashed non-human object. In all 3 scenarios, young Marines performing their duties were held at gunpoint and threatened with death several times. In one case, Castle's, the earliest of the 3, the clandestine all-black team fled once their Overwatch Triangle darted out of sight, and clearly some commanding officer or person of authority contacted USMC commanding officers to make sure the Marines who stumbled upon the secret operation by accident would not discuss encountering the USAP or CAP technology. In the other 2 encounters, the Marines were forcibly stripped of their gear, debriefed, and forced to sign extensive non-disclosure agreements under penalty of death by senior Air Force personnel. This series of events implies that after Castle's encounter, systems were put in place for how these black teams would actually deal with blue or friendly assets stumbling upon their missions, while conducting operations parallel but out of sight to blue assets. Although the Triangle and team clearly failed this hypothesized directive in Hunter Warrior to operate in the shadows free from USMCIs, this theory also supports that clearly methods were developed to deal with such blue encounters moving forward. And indeed, I do have further statements to support this hypothesis. Recently, Ross Coulthart has come out to state he believes with high conviction that thanks to his many sources, the infamous Tic Tac encountered by Commander David Fravor of the USS Nimitz off the coast of San Diego in 2004 was Lockheed Martin's Skunkworks technology. Now, regarding this controversial statement, I have zero knowledge if the Tic Tac was for sure human-made technology. I do, however, have my own framework that there are non-human Tic Tacs and human-made copy Tic Tacs, but let's entertain Ross's theory here for a moment. If, and I mean if, the Tic Tac was indeed reverse-engineered technology out of the Lockheed Skunkworks, the flying propane tank-like craft operating in restrictive active U.S. Navy airspace that actually flew to the Navy aircraft cap point, which CAP is a Combat Air Patrol designated reference point. Don't confuse this with Controlled Access Program CAP. Clearly sought to operate and test on blue assets, in this case, Commander David Fravor and the VFA-41 Black Aces. Now, some of the arguments I have seen for the Tic Tac not being man-made are claims that the Navy or any U.S. entity would never test technologies on their own pilots and servicemen. But this is incorrect, and this is actually done commonly. So, if the Tic Tac was flying within the AO, or area of operations, of the USS Nimitz aviation exercises, this would imply the Tic Tac could have been gauging reaction types, times, speeds, methods, etc. of an unknowing force if any blue assets were to ever make unknown enemy contact. Warning the pilots beforehand taints the results and observations. But remember, all this around the Nimitz is just a hypothesis. But if true, clearly ties into Castle and demonstrates instances in which human-made reverse-engineered vehicles operate within acknowledged war games or large-scale warfighter experiments to both test on blue assets and operate in the shadows parallel to blue assets. The Nimitz here also gives us a perfect segue into the Navy. Why in the world would we discuss the Navy over USMC? Well, this is because I believe, with very strong conviction might I add, the triangular craft and team operated at the behest of the U.S. Navy with likely cooperation or asset sharing with the U.S. Air Force. Let me explain here, and this will shockingly tie into much of my previous work. Returning to the 1997 USMC news release detailing findings on Hunter Warrior, we can see both the Marine Corps Combat Development Center and the Center for Naval Analyses release summary of experiment findings to the Deputy Commanding General of the MCCDC. The Center for Naval Analyses, administrated by the CNA Corporation, is a Department of Defense and Navy federally funded research and development center, or FFRDC, as we will call it from here on out. If you are a longtime viewer of my channel, this is definitely old news, but if you are a new viewer to my channel, the foundation of my research points to FFRDCs and how these semi-private, government-controlled research development test and evaluation centers act as liaison between United States government/DoD and U.S. defense contractors for UFO reverse engineering and material exploitation programs, alongside their university counterparts, university-affiliated research centers, or UARCs. Such institutions, according to my work, serve as subject matter experts and provide necessary R&D work on project materials. This would in turn keep knowledge access in technology of unknown origin programs quite strict, only allowing contractor personnel with a need to know full insights into the full extent of the non-human materials on which the programs focus. The Navy employs numerous UARCs and FFRDCs. UARCs here include the Applied Physics Laboratories at Johns Hopkins and the University of Washington, as well as the Applied Research Laboratories at the University of Hawaii at Manoa, University of Texas at Austin, and Pennsylvania State University.
Now, interestingly, the Senate Intelligence and Armed Services Committee and other senior officials had no idea of this. The top people in Special Forces who are outside this illegal black project system didn't know about it. I had known about it since the 90s, but I'd never, of course, flown directly over it because it's classified airspace and very sensitive. So you can see what looks like a trough and a runway. It's just where the man-made UFOs that we've been building since the 1954-55 come out. They go up and they hover. They're silent. They're electrogravitic, anti-grav. The diamond on the left, you see that looks like a runway with a diamond? It's not a runway because they don't need to run and get, there's not an aerodynamic. They just go boom, up. But they're placed over different diamonds. I have a whole series of video and pictures of these we don't have time to go through. And that's where they're put at various elevations and then struck with an electromagnetic weapon to see if it's hardened enough to withstand conflict, right?
I myself have covered extensively the legends of Tejon and rumors of an enormous underground installation connecting Tejon to Edwards, China Lake, and myriad UFO legacy program sites. We study Tejon and Hellendale because of the artwork of forensic artist Bill McDonald in his 1992 piece Tehachapi Triangle. McDonald met with 4 old engineers at the Denny's in Antelope Valley in the spring of 1992. 2 of the engineers hailed from Lockheed Hellendale RCS plant, and 2 hailed from Northrop Tejon RCS plant. Fed up with the security quote-unquote impositions that affected their quality of life and the locations at which they were required to live out a significant portion of their lives, the engineers dictated a craft they had designed and constructed called the XF-131 Super Sentinel. As I have said before, McDonald was then contacted by Chris Carter of the X-Files to include the very real XF-131 in Season 1, Episode 1 of the X-Files. I have talked to McDonald personally, attempting to contact these engineers, but McDonald is unwilling to reveal their identities, and I respect his decision. Could, less likely in my opinion, instead of TR-3B, the triangular craft been an XF-131 Super Sentinel, kept in the bowels of Tejon or Hellendale that saw regular test flights over R-2508 with pilots from the AFFTC, that was called to action by NAWDC and NAS Lemoore to conduct test operations in the Hunter Warrior Advanced Warfighting Experiment, aiming to get ARV teams on ground undetected in areas populated by Blue forces. And this leads me to a theory I'd like to propose. This theory says that the team Castle encountered in 1997 was not Air Force or Navy enlisted personnel, JSOC or Joint Special Operations Command or SOCOM Special Operations Command teams, but instead a private team from Wackenhut, working with the Navy and Air Force. In this theory, in 2002, Wackenhut attempted to recruit Castle to these clandestine teams, possibly to a group like the infamous quote-unquote Blue Boys, alleged UFO crash retrieval rapid response teams operating from within U.S. military bases employing helicopter units. As I stated earlier, Wackenhut historically provided professional security, especially perimeter security, for many U.S. DoD and Department of Energy installations. And these included the Nevada test site, the ever-elusive Groom Lake Area 51, and Los Alamos National Labs. And additionally, Wackenhut allegedly served as a CIA front in the Cold War and beyond. A theory likely proven in the JFK files in a released March 1963 memo detailing the Wackenhut Corporation wishing to serve as cover for the CIA. In the 1989 book, The Terrorism Industry by Edward S. Herman, the board of Wackenhut and connections to U.S. intelligence agencies was scrutinized. Remember how in my SAIC video, I referred to SAIC by its nickname NSA West? as so many US DoD and intelligence officials traded their stars and stripes in for business suits at SAIC. It seems that Wackenhut operated as a similar revolving door for accomplished military and intelligence professionals. In his book, Herman discussed how two figures I've associated with UFO legacy program operations in the past served on the board of Wackenhut in the 1980s. And this is not to mention Bobby Ray Inman, a pillar stone of U.S. intelligence, SAIC, and Wackenhut I believe is one of the most key members to UFO programs in history. One such figure mentioned by Herman was Frank Carlucci, U.S. Secretary of Defense, and an individual I wagered may have been alongside Brad Sorensen to the classified section of the 1988 Norton Air Force Base Air Show, where Fluxliner alien reproduction vehicles were observed. Additionally on the Wackenhut board was William F. Rayborn, who also served on the board of SAIC and was also the director of the Polaris submarine program in the U.S. Navy. In my video on Jonathan Weygandt, I proposed a theory that the UFO crash retrieval team were Wackenhut trained and staffed Department of Energy Special Response Teams, or SRTs. But overall wagered the crash retrieval team was more likely nearby U.S. Army Green Berets recruited as Special Mission Unit for USAT procedures. But let's talk a little bit about SRT. This anti-nuclear terrorism team is the DOE's own elite task force. An elite operator force entrusted with moving nuclear arsenals across the United States. The Special Response Team has arrest on-site authority, and at least in the 1980s donned all black outfits and gear, similar to the outfits described by Castle. Historically, in the late 90s, DOE SRT units also provided security for sensitive DOE defense nuclear facilities, including Los Alamos National Labs and Lawrence Livermore National Labs. These DOE SRT teams were trained by Wackenhut. And not just trained by Wackenhut, but these elite, highly capable DOE SRTs were comprised of Wackenhut employees. According to the General Accounting Office, beginning in 1987, Wackenhut subcontracted Department of Energy Guard Services not only A, controlled access to sites, conducting roving patrols of site perimeters, and responded to physical security alarms, B, conducted property searches and inspections of facilities, personnel, and vehicles, and C, provided protection for classified and unclassified documents and other government property and facilities, but also that Wackenhut provided special response teams to act at the behest of the DOE. SRTs are really no joke. These individuals are the ultimate Department of Energy INDUSEC, or Industrial Security Team, entrusted with transporting nuclear materials around the continental United States. One of the reasons I suspected Wackenhut DOE SRT was not involved in Weygandt's case is because SRTs historically have acted within the continental United States, not abroad. After all, these Wackenhut trained and staffed teams do have arrest authority in quote-unquote recovery operations on U.S. soil. So, what if the Special Mission Unit accompanying the Triangle during Hunter Warrior was indeed a Wackenhut trained and staffed Department of Energy SRT that acted parallel to Castle, who was busy and dutifully engaging in USMC AV-8B Harrier crash retrieval exercises? This clandestine SRT unit instead operated alongside Navy and Air Force ARV programs, engaged in UFO crash retrieval exercises within the continental United States. When investigating the case of Jonathan Weygandt, I arrived at the conclusion based off of several lines of thinking the on-site scientific team securing the UFO crash site was DOE NEST, or DOE Nuclear Emergency Response Team. Part of my rationale here is the fact DOE NEST's governing authority is the 1954 Atomic Energy Agreement. The Schumer Rounds UFO legislation, called the UAPDA, references this 1954 Atomic Energy Agreement as a system leveraged to improperly classify UFO materials, hardware, biologics, etc. as, quote, transclassified foreign nuclear information, end quote. This same logic here for Weygand and DOE Nest applies to Castle and DOE SRT. If SRT units, formerly trained and staffed by Wackenhut, are indeed conducting domestic UFO crash retrieval operations, just as with Nest, the DOE could likely leverage the same 1954 Atomic Energy Agreement to effectively black hole any UFO retrieval operations, recovered materials, etc. I myself have personally heard rumors from sources of UFO crashes being transported across the continental United States, haphazardly labeled nuclear material and guarded by SRT. After all, if UFO materials are indeed obfuscated under the 1954 Atomic Energy Act as transclassified foreign nuclear information, which I fully believe it does it not make perfect sense highly trained DOE SRTs entrusted with transporting US nuclear materials and weapons would be the same operators to transport recovered craft? If this team observed by Castle was indeed Wackenhut, this wouldn't be the first time Wackenhut suffered such a folly. Meet Richard Mingus, a Federal Services security guard at the Nevada test site from 1957 to 1953, who oftentimes worked at Area 51. In 1982, Mingus was securing an underground nuclear test area at Area 6 on the Nevada test site while the base featured a live nuclear bomb exposed above ground. Whilst lowering the bomb underground for explosives testing, the base at Area 6 quickly came under attack by armed combatants. Mingus was primarily responsible for coordinating the breach of security up through the chain of command, all the way up to President Ronald Reagan, as the event was a significant national security issue. It was later determined the men attacking were simply conducting a drill from where else but Wackenhut.